Hi, today I would like to talk to you about ripping back your brioche projects. So, I'm guessing that for many of you, the idea of pulling your needles out of your brioche project and ripping back your stitches is scary, but I promise that it can be done and you can be successful. Um, Doing this with a slippery yarn, such as something containing silk or some superwash yarns, is a little bit riskier, but it can still be done. If you're using a grippy yarn like a non-superwash wool, then you're very safe to be able to do this. So this technique is a great thing to do if you have found a mistake several rows back in your brioche project. You don't want to take the time to take one stitch at a time all the way back to your mistake, and it's not something that you can easily drop down and fix. So, say if you forgot to do an increase. So, in order to do this, you're going to want, obviously, your project. Here I'm working on a size 8 needle, and you're going to want another set of needles that is several sizes smaller than the one you're working on. So I've chosen a size 5. So the first thing I am going to do is take all of my stitches off of my needle. So there is my project, and the needles are out. Now, depending on how the edges of your project have been knit, or whether or not you're knitting in the round, it is possible to rip out your brioche project one color at a time. And you might see videos of people doing this, and it creates a fun, lacy appearance. If your goal is to put your needles back in and be able to pick your project up again, I strongly advise against doing this because it can be very hard to make sure that your different colors have been ripped out to the same row. Instead, I suggest frogging both colors at the same time. So let's get my tail out of the way. So here I am going to grab both my pink and my green and pull both out together at the same time. Again, depending on how you've done your edge stitches, you may need to finesse the last stitch a little bit. So I'm going to pull out one more row. All right, so now you have two choices. You can pull back to the row that you want to work to, and then take your smaller needle and very carefully insert that needle back into your work. I don't stress about whether my stitches are twisted at this point. I try and orient them correctly, but worry more about making sure they are getting on the needle without running down, and then I can always adjust them on my first row that I'm knitting. So I want to pick up that pink stitch, and then the green with its yarn over, then the pink that leans to the front, and then the green with its yarn over. And doing this on a smaller needle than what I originally worked allows me to pick these stitches up without applying much tension to them, which helps keep the adjacent stitches from running down. So you can see I'm inserting the needle from the back to keep the stitches oriented the right way, picking up the pink and then the green and its yarn over. work across the whole row this way. Oops, having a hard time getting that green one to go on the needle. All right, got it. And I want to pick up that yarn over with it. So you can see I'm about halfway. I've gotten half of those stitches back on. So that is one way that you can pick your stitches back up. My other technique that I like is I'm going to rip out one more row. The project is getting pretty small here. All right, now what I often do is use those live stitches as sort of a lifeline so that I'm pulling out that last stitch I need to pull out, that last row I need to pull out as I'm inserting my needles back in. I still like to use a smaller needle for this just to give myself a little bit of extra wiggle room so I'm not putting too much tension on the needles. So I'm going to put my needle into that last stitch and then pull, oops, and then pull that yarn out. So then I can see here I have a pink and a yarn over, and I can insert my needle into the stitch below it and then pull that loop loose. Oops, the next stitch came out as I was tugging, so this is why I like to have that smaller needle so that I still am not putting tension on there. So then, again, I do this as if I'm tinking, so if you haven't seen my video on tinking, check that out. This can help. That can help with this technique. And this just gives me a little bit of added security that my stitches aren't totally loose as I'm ripping back. And I have a little bit of structure to support them as I'm reinserting my needle. So I'm putting it into that pink stitch below and pull the pink out, then into the green and the yarn over, and pulling back. So again, you can see that I'm ending up with the same structure with the stitches back on the needle. So whichever way you prefer, whatever's easier for you, both will get you with your stitches put back on the needle. And especially if you're using a grippy yarn, either one is pretty safe to do. Just go slow, take your time, and watch how you pick those stitches back up. So I now have all of my stitches back on a size 5 needle. So the only thing I have to do now is remember when I start knitting again to switch back to my original needle so that I'm working and maintaining the same gauge. I hope this is helpful. I find this to be a great technique when I know I need to rip back a number of rows. It can be much faster than trying to tink them out stitch by stitch. Thank you for watching. I hope that this helps you feel brave in tackling mistakes in your brioche knitting.